A young woman sits opposite a little girl in an ice cream parlor. There is something rather odd about the woman's behavior. She doesn't quite know how to act in public. She smiles at the kid, but when she leaves the parlor, she does something you'd expect only a psychopath to do. Thus begins the Golden Globe winning spy drama Killing Eve, starring Sandra Oh as secret agent Eve Polastri and Jodie as the formidable and psychopathic serial killer Villanelle. The first season of the show is written by none other than Phoebe Waller-Bridge of Fleabag fame. While the show has garnered global acclaim and has been renewed for a third season, Indian viewers are getting to experience it only now. Better late than never, I would say. Killing Eve, which is based on the codename Villanelle novel series by Luke Jennings, tells the story of Eve Polastri, an MI5 agent bored of her desk job and obsessed with women assassins. When a Russian politician is murdered, the head of the Russia section of MI6, Caroline Martins, hires Eve to find the pattern in seemingly unrelated killings that may lead them to the untraceable Villanelle. Trouble is not interested in me, says Eve, and of course she is wrong. Trouble is all that's interested in her as we follow her and Villanelle through the 8 episodes of Killing Eve Season 1. What begins as a cat and mouse chase ends up, as O says in an interview with Ellen DeGeneres, being a cat and cat relationship. Eve is inescapably sucked into Villanelle's world as the show takes us to Vienna, Paris, Tuscany, Berlin, and more beautiful locations. The obsession costs Eve dearly as she begins to unravel, but it's also what keeps the audience hooked to the show. The most obvious interpretation of the show is in terms of the biblical story of Eve's fall, the title of the show and the main protagonist's name being the natural giveaways. The premise too lends itself into this reading. Eve takes a bite of the forbidden fruit in her unhealthy fixation with Villanelle and has a lot to lose as she falls deeper into the mystery of Villanelle's past. Eve and Villanelle play into this biblical fantasy, though the show doesn't limit itself to this framework alone. What it does instead is make role-playing a central motive and a medium of storytelling. Clothes and languages are a huge part of Villanelle's shifting identity, and Comer plays the part exceedingly well. The BAFTA-winning actress's masterful grasp on languages and her skill in delivering different accents is beyond amazing. Villanelle's got style in both her costume and killings. She's outlandish, arrogant, and a complete show-off, and her attire, particularly when she is playing herself, reflects that. Eve, on the other hand, is a rather rushed everyday dresser. For Eve, it's clearly more about substance than style. Despite the obvious differences, there is a strange mirroring between Eve and Villanelle such that, by the end, you're not really sure who is doing the killing. What ties Eve, Villanelle, and Caroline is that they're all kind of weird when it comes to sticking to social codes of behavior. Villanelle trips the bowl of ice cream on the little girl in the very first scene of the show. Caroline remarks about being fascinated by a mouse drinking from a can of Coke, and Eve gives a rather detailed plan, in jest, of how she'd kill her husband. The 3 women are eccentric, but brilliant, if you ask me, and along with the role-playing element in the show, highlight the double standards of the social codes that put people into neat boxes and define normalcy. Villanelle is the obvious psychopath, but you're left wondering, is everyone mad here? The show also challenges social codes in its treatment of sexuality. When Eve asks her work partner and friend Bill whether he's gay, he says, "I fall in love with who I fall in love with." Killing Eve has been criticized for queerbaiting, especially because the relationship between Eve and Villanelle is never explicitly defined in the show. There was a huge backlash when O, in an interview to Gay Times, said, "You guys are tricky because you want to make it into something, but it just isn't." However, if one views this in the context of the show's overall attempt to defy exacting definitions of madness, identity, and sexuality, it does make sense. Finally, if you're a fan of spy thrillers, watch Killing Eve for its plot, brilliant acting, and gripping twists and turns. If that's not your preferred genre, watch the show for everything else that it has to offer. Also, don't miss the show's fantastic soundtrack.